Hello there, my name is Will and today I'm going to be providing a video tutorial about the updated RapidWeaver multilingual stacks for RapidWeaver. This is probably going to be quite a long video, so by all means get comfortable and perhaps get a drink or something. If you can't watch a full video all the way through, then by all means pause or stop the video and come back to finish watching it at a later time. I've got a list here of about 10 or 12 different things to run through. Some of them take more time than others, so this could be quite a long video. I don't know yet how long it's going to be, but yeah, word of warning, it could be quite a long one, this one. So what is RapidWeaver Multilingual? Basically it's a set of stacks which you can add to your website in RapidWeaver, and it helps you basically build a website which is multilingual, so it's available in different language versions for different site visitors. Stacks have been around for quite a long time. They've proven to be very popular. I've recently acquired and taken over development of the stacks, and this version 2 is a major update on the previous version with a lot of new changes and various optimizations towards making the stacks not only easier to use but a lot more flexible in the types of websites which we are typically building nowadays. The theme I'm using today is called Atlas, and this is available from Say Design. Ordinarily you can use RapidWeaver multilingual stacks with lots of different themes. I've just picked this one today because it's just quite a nice design. Gives us something to sort of play around with and explore the stacks in some more detail. So without further ado, I will just switch into edit mode. You can see I've already set up a very basic website here in RapidWeaver. I've just got 5 simple pages. They're all stacks pages. The first step of RapidWeaver Multilingual is going to be to add a master stack to your project. So to do that, we go into the stacks library. I'm just going to search for RapidWeaver Multilingual. This brings up all the stacks. I'm going to drag and drop the master stack into the page like this. If I double click the window heading, the stack heading I should say, I can access all the settings over here on the right hand side. So it functions more or less like any other stack you would use. We start by setting a default language. In this case it's EN, which is the ISO code for English. But in this example I'm going to pretend I want to add Spanish and French versions too. So I'm going to type ES and FR, which are the ISO language codes for French and Spanish. And that is the master stack basically all set up. There isn't really anything else you need to change at this point. The master stack is very important though, because it does contain about 95% or so of all the code and functionality that the RapidWeaver multilingual stacks require. So wherever you're using the multilingual stacks, it's vital that you include one of these master stacks on the same web page. We can go back and we can see that we've added a master stack, but at the moment nothing has changed. But what we can do now is we can progress on to add an actual switch, so that somebody come into the website, although they're going to see English as the default language, they've got the option to switch into either Spanish or French. And to do that, I'm just going to open the library again. I'm going to look through my RapidWeaver multilingual stacks, and I'm going to pull in a switch stack into the page like so. There's 2 types of switch available, and that's changeable up here in the stack settings. We can either have an option select menu, or we can toggle between having text and images to create a sort of custom switch. For the time being I'm just going to stick with an option select menu because that's just nice and simple. So we've got a label set up in the option select menu for English straight away, but we need to set one up for Spanish, we need to set one up for French too. So for label 2, and I've drafted out a few translations already here. So label 2 is going to be for Spanish version. So we're going to say it'll be this one. The language code is ES and the text is Espanol, like so. And the French is going to be language code is FR, and the text will be like that. So the language codes I've used here correspond with what I've just set up in the master stack. And if I go ahead and preview my page now, you can see that we've gained a language switcher. I can click on the language switcher and now I can toggle between English, Spanish or French. And indeed, if I select something like Spanish, the page refreshes and you can see that the actual label within the option select menu also updates. But most importantly, if I open the web inspector and I click onto storage and go into cookies, and you can see that RapidWeaver Multilingual has now created a cookie that stores the preferred language that I want to view the page in. So in this case I want to switch to Spanish, so it's created a value of ES for the tracking cookie. This is quite clever now because it means if I come back to the website anytime within the next 90 days, the system is going to remember that I want to view all the pages or the content in Spanish. And likewise, when I'm navigating between different pages, rather than having to use that select menu each time to reset the menu, to reset the language, sorry, I can actually just, it does it all automatically, so I don't need to worry. So from that perspective, it's a very user-friendly system. When you're testing, if you want to delete the cookie, just open it in a web inspector like I've done here, select it and just hit the delete key, and that will reset it, in this case back to English. And if you're wondering how to get the web inspector to work in RapidWeaver, if you open the RapidWeaver preferences and click on advanced down here, you've got the option here to enable web developer tools, and that means that I can click anywhere on the preview here, and when I click select element or inspect element, it brings up the web inspector. And you can see that the something else I should point out, that the default language always goes to what you've set in the master stack, so it always defaults in this case to English. If you'd set the default language as something else, say German or Dutch or something else, it would be that instead. So there's always a tracking cookie set, even when somebody doesn't set a language, and it just makes it a lot easier and a bit more convenient for people. So you can see we're getting, making quite a bit of progress already with this. What I'm going to do now though is actually set up some content so we can actually play around with switching between different language versions of the content. What I'll do is to open the library again, and I'm going to start by using a new wrapper stack, which is one of the new stacks in version 2, which I've added to RapidWeaver Multilingual. And I'm just going to close the library again. So the basic wrapper stack, we can select that and we can choose our language code. So here it says EN, so that's English. And what I can do is drag and drop another block of content or other stacks inside the wrapper. And that one will show on English. To make this a bit clearer, what I will do is just type in here English. Right, so that's, that just makes it a bit clearer for the purposes of this demonstration. I will now duplicate this stack. Clever trick for duplicating stacks is to hold down the Alt key on your keyboard and click and drag a stack, and it actually just creates an exact clone of it, which makes things nice and quick. And for this language I'm going to set it to FR, and I'll just change this to French. And we'll just duplicate this one again, and we'll change this one to ES, which will be for Spanish, like that. So we've got a couple of wrapper stacks with blocks of content within. Just save the changes, and now I will go and preview the page. So the default language I've come in on the website at is English, but if I change the language here to say Spanish, and you can see that our block of content is now updated to the Spanish version, and we can do the same for French as well. and there's our French content. So this straight away offers a very quick and convenient way for people to switch language and see alternative blocks of content. One quite important thing in version 2 now is that the old version just used to use JavaScript to swap between these different blocks of content. Nothing terribly wrong with that, other than with JavaScript, because it runs on the client's computer or on the user's web browser, you end up having to download all the content. So in this case I'd be downloading both English, Spanish and French, and only choosing to display one of those. The new system we've got in place uses something called PHP, which is a sort of server-side scripting language. So this means the actual conditional checks of what language and what content to send down to the user is all done from the web server, and this does bring some rather considerable improvements to page loading speed and the whole efficiency of your multilingual setup. So that's just quite a bit technical, but something just to bear in mind with using these new stacks. So that is a wrapper stack setup. There's another way you can translate some basic content and sentences, and that's using the short text stack. And I'll just delete these wrapper stacks again, leaving the master stack and the switch stack in the page. Going to open the stacks library, and I'm going to put in a short text stack into the bottom down here. And in this stack it's slightly different in that we've got the option to set up our language codes again. So I'm going to type in ES for Spanish, I'm going to type in FR for French, and I'm just going to type in the box this time Spanish, and I'm going to type in French like so. So this one's just a nice simple language switcher content regulator to set up. If I go and preview the page now, and you can see that it just alternates between very simple text, Spanish, and then we'll say English. What we can do with short text is to actually wrap the content within other HTML elements. So at the moment it's just body text, but if I wanted to, I could just set it to become H1 headings. And you can see that increases the size of our text here quite considerably. So the short text stack would be perfect to use for things like section headings, chapter titles, things like that. Just short amounts of text or sentences that you want translated into different languages, which will show up depending on what language the user has selected on the website. One of the next things we'll look at now is the actual translation of the menu links at the top. Ultimately, you know, these are one of the primary ways people will navigate around your website, so it does make sense to try and translate them into an appropriate language. Because if people don't see the links in their own language, they're probably not going to click on them. It's as simple as that. You would think that because things like theme navigation links are way outside of the normal stack's editable areas, you wouldn't be able to touch these, but that's not the case with RapidWeaver Multilingual, in that we've got a dedicated stack called the menu stack that will help you translate these. So I'm going to go ahead and just add a menu stack to the page like so, and then we select one of these sub items at the bottom here. I'll close the library for now, and what we do is we actually look for specific links. So in this case, this page here we called About Us, which would correspond with a page over here called About Us in the sidebar. And then similar to the short text stack, we can use ISO language codes to determine which languages to target and then provide the translations accordingly. So in this case I'm going to set up a translation. We'll start with the home page to begin with. So we'll leave the English version as home. We'll set the Spanish version to Casa. French version. Like that. So it's just updated in edit mode now, just to show us our translations for that menu item. So let's just change that again. So we want to target the home page. There we go. So the home page now, by default in English it'll be home, in Spanish it'll be at casa, and in French we've got this translation here as well. And if I just preview the page quickly, and you can probably just see then how, because I'm viewing the web page as a Spanish user, it's just changed the homepage link to casa now. Incidentally, it's also just updated the breadcrumb link too at the bottom of the page here. And indeed, if I make the page switch into mobile mode, you'll see the homepage link at the top here is changed to casa here as well. So it's actually updating the names of these links in multiple places of the page, which is a nice added convenience. I will go ahead now and just add additional translations for each of the other 4 remaining menu links. Okay then, so that's the translation setup of the other remaining menu items. If I go back and preview the page now, I can't promise all these translations are correct, so I'm just typing really quickly, but you can see hopefully at the top of the page now that when I switch language, we actually alternate between the different translations for menu items. So this is a nice little user-friendly setup. And again, as I pointed out before, the breadcrumb link also updates. And if we switch into mobile mode, we can see that our navigation links in the mobile navigation menu are also updated. So it updates globally in all instances where you've got the page navigation links. One other thing you can do is, of course, if you've got things like font awesome icons within your navigation items, which is quite common, you can continue to provide those. So for example, if in the About Us page I'll just put a font awesome icon of something like FA star. And you can see that the font awesome icon I've added remains there even though the actual text for the link has changed. This is an improvement over previous versions. So I know that font awesome icons are quite popular to use in menus for things like if you want to denote that there's a drop down menu available, or you just want to put some nice icons next to links. So the next thing we can have a go at is to translate the sidebar here. So I'm going to switch back into edit mode. I'm going to leave the menu translate stack in for the time being. I'm going to add a sidebar stack. And again, a bit like the wrapper stack, you can drag and drop stacks into here. But what we would probably want to do in this instance is use the sidebar stack but put in a wrapper stack. So I'm going to leave that as English. I'll just put in a simple text stack. This will be our Spanish one. And this will be our French version of the sidebar content. And what you probably want to do at this stage would be to remove any sidebar content you've got in the sidebar already from the RapidWeaver page inspector. close the library, go and preview the page, and you can see now it's actually swapping over our sidebar content quite nicely, with the exception of the sidebar title. That's not difficult to fix though. What we can do is, because the sidebar title is still being set here in the RapidWeaver page inspector, we can use some code snippets to actually convert that into Spanish and French versions too. The user guide documents two different types of code snippets you can use. We've got like a sort of plain, very simple language attributes, or we can actually use some PHP tags. I will just use some simple HTML language attributes here, so we'll say I'm going to wrap this into just a span tag. Language equals en, so that will be our title for English. Set as the title for Spanish. And we'll just do the same for French. So these language attributes are very simple to use. They're not complicated at all, and you can apply them to any types of content. They can be very useful and still relevant in RapidWeaver Multilingual, even though we have sort of advanced the stacks quite a bit now. They are still things you can use. So that is our translation setup, just coded very, very quickly with just some HTML markup. And if I preview the page, there's our English sidebar title. And I'll just switch into Spanish. There we go, Spanish. And we'll try French as well. There we go, so that's working perfectly. Nice and simple. Next thing we might want to update would be perhaps some information down here in the website footer, for example. There might be individual words we want to swap out, or something like our website slogan. So I can go back into edit mode, I'm going to search for RapidWeaver Multilingual stacks again. This time I'm going to add RapidWeaver Multilingual replace stack. So I'll just put this at the bottom of the page. Very, very simple stack to use. Choose the language code to begin with. Then we're going to provide a selector name, which we'll do in a second. You enter the word that you want to find, and you enter the word you want to replace. So if, for example, on the Spanish section of the website I want to replace contact, or no, let's say copyright in the footer. Now this won't work straight away because I need to do something else. I actually need to come down here into where the content is I want to change. I'm going to right click on it. I'm going to select inspect element. I'm just going to look up its name, its ID. So I can see that this footer's got a class of footer. So that should make things fairly easy. So for select name I just type dot footer, press return. Let's change our language, Spanish, and you can see down here now in the website footer that string of text is now updated and has been translated. So this just offers a very nice simple way to cherry pick a few elements in the page which you can't ordinarily reach and convert them to a different language. And we just use some simple JavaScript code here to accomplish this. By going through the process of actually selecting an element, and again I can just do another example here. We can say I want to change the site slogan. I'll just demonstrate this quickly. So H2, going to find slogan. Let's just replace this. There we go, so that's just updated the site slogan. So the actual process of using select names is all about efficiency. By actually giving the RapidWeaver multilingual replace stack a selector name, the web browser knows to look in that particular part of the page to find and replace the text. So again, it can bring some quite big efficiency savings by doing that. And for these RapidWeaver multilingual replace stacks, you can use as many as you want and just customize the ISO language code for the target language, the selector name, and the actual text you want to find and replace. So it's a relatively straightforward stack to use. The only thing you might struggle with is the actual getting the selector names using this sort of inspect element. If you are a bit of a newbie to web development, you might not have come across the web inspector before. It can look quite scary and quite daunting, but it's relatively simple to use once you've mastered it. And if you've got any questions, you can either ask me or ask on the RapidWeaver forums if you need help getting these selector names or IDs, things like that. There is also a very nice little stack which I make available through the Say Design website called Codify. And it works more or less the same as the web inspector in Safari and Chrome and RapidWeaver, but it's a bit more simplified, so you might find that one a bit more user friendly if you're having difficulty getting these selector names. But like I say, all the selector name is doing is telling the web browser, hey, look in this container for this text and replace it with this text. So you're just being a bit more specific about the text to find and to replace. It would be a bit dangerous if we did a global find and replace over the whole page, because obviously there's a lot of code and content out of sight which you can't see, which we don't want to change. And again, there's performance issues, as I've discussed already. Let's move on now and create a redirect. So we can assume what I'll do first, actually, so this doesn't go spectacularly wrong, is I'll just clear the tracking cookie from the inspector again. So I'll go into storage and we'll just zap that and put it back to English. So we'll put in a redirect stack now. So a redirect stack just basically looks at what language a user has selected. If language equals selected language, we send the person onto a different web page. This can be useful for very complicated stacks that you simply can't translate or put within a RapidWeaver multilingual wrapper stack. Prime example would be things like a contact form or a blog. Those things are just too difficult to translate a lot of the time. There's too many variables, too many bits of text that need to be changed. And in the case of things like a contact form, quite possibly, the success message which a person gets sent needs to be in their preferred language, and you might even choose to have the contact form mailed to different people depending on language. So again, some of these stacks, it's easier to set them up on their own pages and just redirect people to the stacks, and that's what the redirect stack does. So I'll go ahead and add one of those to the page now. Again, you should find it's quite simple to set up. It's this one here, redirect. I'll add it on my page. It's very similar to the short text stack in that you define the ISO language codes. So in this case I'm going to type ES and FR to correspond with Spanish and French. And then you just click on the set link button to choose the link that you want to set. So this can either be links to external websites, or you can use web pages or resources actually within your project. Nice and simple to set up. So in this hypothetical situation, we're just going to have the Spanish version point to example.com, and we'll have the French users go to google.com. And if you leave like the English version or default blank, nothing happens. So you can set up language codes but not actually have redirect links set up for them. Obviously just add one redirect stack link per page. Just preview that. So here we are in our English selection, and I can choose Spanish, and I get redirected straight off to the other domain. So that's pretty simple to get set up and working. Next thing I'm going to do is to demonstrate how to set up metadata. So I'm going to open the library, look through my RapidWeaver multilingual stacks again, and this time I'm going to add a meta stack to the page. As is pointed out in the settings here, the actual meta stack itself doesn't have any settings of its own. You instead add these sub-stacks using the plus button here for each language translation. So we can start by translating, this would be the English version, so we can translate things like website, page title, description and keywords, but we can also translate bits and pieces required for Facebook sharing, and we can also translate content for Twitter cards as well. So you get the general idea. And this would be quite important to use, I think, in a multilingual website, because obviously if you're promoting your website for people to share with services like Facebook and Twitter, they want to be doing so in their preferred language. It's no point having a Spanish person trying to share a link to Facebook and all that's coming up is the English content and English version of the website. So this is a nice way of doing it, and we can just go ahead and add these, add one of these for each translation, and I can show you what it would look like in the source code of the page. So I'll just switch back to English for now, and we'll look at the page source code. So RapidWeaver Multilingual, what I'm highlighting now is it does set up alternative links for search engines to follow. So these are telling search engines like Google that yes, the page is written in one language, but if you check these links you can actually get to alternative language versions of a website. So search engines like that. Then we've got our description metadata, and we've got some keywords as well. If I was to go ahead and just switch on support for Facebook and Twitter as well, and I'll just open up that web inspector again, and we can see what else has been added, and I'll just highlight these from the bottom upwards. So we've got some extra metadata here for Twitter, provide some details of a website and again the alternative language versions, and we've got some extra information in here for Facebook too. So this optimizes pages very nicely for not only search engines but also for social media. Search engines aren't stupid. They know you're trying your best and you're trying to translate a website into different languages, and the code that RapidWeaver Multilingual writes into the page just gives them a helping hand in sort of saying, hey look, this page is available in different languages, you might want to try looking at this content too, sort of thing. And from the early tests I've done, it's proven extremely successful, and again for the feedback from some of the beta testers as well has been very positive. They've said they've actually seen search engine optimization improve somewhat after switching over to using multilingual, RapidWeaver multilingual, as opposed to other sort of competing stacks. So this is a good new little stack to be using within your web pages, and you should find it fairly straightforward to configure. Ordinarily you can probably leave Twitter and Facebook sharing turned off if you don't need those services exactly. The ones to get right are search engine optimization, so things like the page title, the description and the keywords. Those three are the main ones to get right. The next thing I want to do is to go into a bit more detail about the code snippets. I've shown you already that you can use the stack supplied with RapidWeaver Multilingual to regulate what content is shown based on the user's language selection. But sometimes there might still be parts of the page elsewhere, like in other stacks, or as I showed earlier in the sidebar title, that we can't access directly from the RapidWeaver Multilingual stacks. So it may be feasible to use some simple code instead, simple tags, and I can give you some examples of those now. I will go ahead and just add let's put in an HTML stack into the page. I largely suspect this won't be relevant to a lot of people, but for those who do want to take RapidWeaver Multilingual even further, these tags are quite useful. They're available in the user guide, and you can save them as snippets within the snippets window in RapidWeaver itself. So search for RapidWeaver Multilingual, and we've got the PHP tag we can use. So I'll just copy that one in to begin with and give you a working example of that. It's basically two tags: an opening PHP statement where we're reading the cookie that is stored on the user's computer, and we're saying if the active language is equal to, and in this case we're saying ES, which is Spanish, and if that returns true, then we say I am Spanish content. And ordinarily you can replace this content with anything you want, and you can put in extra code, so I can put in some H1 headings for example. So ordinarily on the web page nothing's shown, but then when I switch to Spanish, there it is. So that shows. With the exception of some stacks which are a bit more complicated in that they don't let you put in code, but ordinarily this is safe to use almost anywhere. The other little simple code snippet we can use is the HTML language tags again. So we just do lang equals and then our value, which in this case is ES Spanish. So you can see working there. When I switch to English it disappears. The other snippet which is worth mentioning is the language switch. Just a pair of anchor tags. So you've got an opening tag here, and then you've got a closing tag here, and you put your content between the two tags, and you just set the actual link applied to the tag to a / followed by a question mark, then the word lang with an equal sign, and then your ISO language code, which in this case is IT for Italian. And that would just generate a very simple link on the page. And if, for example, well, actually we'll demonstrate that now. So I'll change that to ES, and we'll say switch to Spanish. So yeah, ordinarily I'm on the website, I'm looking at the English links here and the English sidebar. If I click here, page refreshes, and we've now got our Spanish content here and our Spanish links at the top here. So that's just another nice little code snippet if you want to experiment with building some quite fanciful language switches, or you want to use another stack and perhaps assign a link to the stack, which means it acts as a language switcher. Opens up a lot of little possibilities, that one. It's a good little fun one to play around with, that one. Final thing I want to cover today is integration with a few other stacks, and that includes the Action Host stack. And again, this ties in quite well with wanting to create perhaps a custom language switcher. The Action Host stack is one I've released recently. It is a separate purchase, but it's not very expensive, and if you've not got it already, I would say it's worth getting. It's available from the Stacks for Stacks website, and we'll add this to a page at the bottom here. And this is just a nice way to manipulate and modify links. So theoretically, we've got ourselves the makings of a very good multilingual website here. We have got a language switcher already, but you might decide it would be nice to have a language switcher up here in the top navigation bar somewhere. And that is possible to do with in combination with something like Action Host. What I'll do is to add a new section to the website, a new page, switch language, then we'll say English, Spanish, French. Go back to the home page. So there's our drop down menu showing now with our little language links. And we can go into Action Host and we can say trigger value is equal to English, and we want to switch language to EN. I'm going to duplicate Action Host and set one up for Spanish now. So if it contains Spanish, language code ES, and we'll do one for French as well while we're in here. So FR French. I can come up here to the menu and I can click on something like Spanish. Page refreshes. Now we're looking at the Spanish version of the website. So this is a good example of integration with another third-party stack, in this case Action Host. We can configure Action Host to actually convert links at the top here into a very simple language switcher. So I hope this has given you a good insight to the RapidWeaver multilingual stacks. Again, I apologise for this video being so long, but I just wanted to get this out here and to give you a full working demonstration of how to use the different stacks, and to hopefully sort of illustrate to you the true power yet simplicity that these stacks can afford you. They are ideal for any instances where you've got an existing website and you want to make it multilingual. There's no other better stacks on the market really, in my opinion. They are absolutely fantastic in what they do. Very simple to use, very effective, they are reliable, and they work well. And they satisfy the needs of not only yourself from ease of setup, but also the search engines, social media, and most importantly the end users to your website as well are given a very nice experience in being able to change language and to alternate between different content based on their language selection. If you do have any further questions about the stacks, then feel free to let me know. You can get in contact with me via the Stacks for Stacks website. You can also post any questions you have about RapidWeaver Multilingual to the RapidWeaver forums. These are very popular stacks. There's a lot of people who use these stacks, so if you've got any general questions, there might be other people who are able to help you. And I think that's all for today, so thank you for watching, and I look forward to hearing from you again soon.